Alright, hey guys, this is Zach from the Rolling Times. And what you see here, and it's probably hard to read because I'm in selfie mode right now. Pierce backed out and didn't show up with his camera. So, tired bears brake bolts shifting. And what that stands for is tire pressure, bearings, brakes, bolts, shifting. This is all stuff you want to check before you go out for your ride. So, just start off, and you can do it in whatever order makes sense for you. I just thought that tired bears brake bolts while shifting is kind of funny. So if you want to follow that or come up with a different order, that's totally up to you. First thing you want to do, tire pressure, front and rear tires. Generally, most tires you'll be able to find on the sidewall a marking of the minimum PSI to the maximum PSI you can run. General rule of thumb is if you're riding on the road, paved stuff, you want to run closer to that maximum pressure, and if you're running off-road, you want to run a little bit lower. On the trail, I usually start my tires at 35 PSI. A lot of people actually find that kind of high. I know people that run 20 PSI in their tires off-road. So I start mine at 30, 35. That's a good place to start. I figure if I need to let more air out for more traction on the trail, I can always let more air out on the trail as opposed to getting the pump out and adding more air. So that's tire pressure. Next is bearings. You want to check out all the bearings on your bike before you take it out. A good way to do that, your hubs, you want to just take the wheel side to side and see if you can get any wiggle out of there. Same thing with the front. No side to side wiggle. Also make sure your quick releases or your axle bolts are tight. If they are loose, obviously you're going to have play, but if they are tight and you still have play, that means your hub bearings have play in them. A little bit of play is not terrible, but generally if you have a little bit of play, it's going to develop into a lot of play. If you have a lot of play, generally you need to replace the hubs or rebuild them. As far as your headset bearings, if you grab your stem and your fork, you should be able to feel any play just by trying to wiggle them. Another thing you can do is sit on the bike, hold the front brake, and see if there's any play back and forth. Sometimes people get confused with the fork moving up and down, or else the brake pad sliding a little bit in the caliper. So I find the easier way is just to check it just like I did there. Cranks, kind of same as the wheel. Hold them like this and wiggle back and forth. See if you can get any play out of that. So that's your bearings. Definitely an important part to check. Next is brake. So different brake, but we're going to check the brakes on the bike. There are a bunch of different kinds of brakes. You have rim brakes, you have mechanical disc brake, or hydraulic disc brakes. With hydraulic disc brakes, you just want to give them a squeeze. Make sure they feel nice and firm. If you have to pump them up so you get stopping power, most likely that you have air in your lines or bad fluid. So you want to get those bled. You don't want that brake to give out on the trail. You don't want to have to pump it up if you need to stop fast. With mechanical disc brakes, if they don't feel real good, you're usually able to tighten those up with the cable tension there. Sometimes there's a barrel adjuster. If you need more, you can loosen the cable and pull more through. We could do a video possibly at some other point on adjusting cable brakes, and that's kind of the same thing with the rim brakes. With rim brakes, you want to make sure the pads are contacting the wheel, not on the tire or not halfway on the braking surface of the rim. I have disc brakes, so I'm not going to go through too much, but you definitely want to pull both your brakes, make sure they work. With disc brakes, sometimes they rub, so you can usually hear a if they are rubbing, but the wheel should be spinning. If it's just a little bit of rubbing, Like my front brake rubs a tiny little bit at one spot, it goes tss, but it spins freely. It's not getting hung up at all. That's acceptable. Next on the list is bolts. I always go around, and that's kind of like your quick releases and stuff. Make sure those are tight. Make sure all the bolts are tight on the bike. So your stem bolts, you just want to go around, tighten all your stem bolts. For the face plate, for the pinch bolts, make sure your seat clamp's tight. Make sure your pedals are on tight. Pedals don't have to be super tight, but you just want to make sure they're not loose. It's good to check them every once in a while. So just go around on the bolts and make sure nothing's loose. You don't have to tighten the crap out of everything, but just make sure nothing's loose. Next thing you want to do is shifting. I don't have a front derailleur. I'm running a 1x10 setup. A lot of bikes are going to either 2x10, 1x10, or 1x11, 2x11. Not too many times you'll see a triple in the front anymore. So my shifting is pretty simple. I just have a rear derailleur, and what you're going to look for is you want to put it down to your smallest cog here and shift up. Just one gear at a time, nice and slow, and then come back down. And what you're looking for is any hesitation. If it hesitates to go up, which is normally the problem, you'll have a barrel adjuster either down here on the derailleur or up here on the shifter for most bikes. If you turn that half turn out, that will add a little bit of tension to the cable. That'll help it go up faster. Like right there on that first shift, you're going to add a little bit of tension. Now it shifts right up. Now, generally you won't have to take away tension unless you already added too much tension. But if you do, when you're coming back down to your small gears, if it hesitates going down, that means you have too much tension, and you want to do the same thing, take a half turn and go in with the barrel adjuster. So you're shortening that and putting less tension on the cable. As you're going through the shifting, if it takes anything more than like a turn or two to get it dialed in, there could be something else wrong. These derailleurs have set screws that limit them how far they can go, so they don't shift over into the wheel or shift off down into the frame. As well as the derailleur hangers that these bolt to they're meant to bend. They're made out of the soft metal that bends. That way you don't break the derailleur, you bend the hanger and you can replace that. A lot of times those get bent, and even if they're bent just a little bit, that can throw your shifting off. Those gears are very close together, so if say those gears are 2 millimeters apart, if that derailleur hanger is bent 1 millimeter in, that can totally mess up your shifting. It can also mess up your sets as well. So even if they were set up right, if that hanger is bent, it could shift into the wheel or shift off, and that can cause a lot of damage. It could also cause injury too. I've seen that happen. The derailleur gets jammed in the wheel and the wheel locks up, and if you have some speed, it could be pretty dangerous. So if you're wondering, if you're unsure about that, you should if you don't know what derailleur sets are, you should probably take it to your local shop if you think something might be messed up there. As far as telling if your derailleur hanger is bent, you usually come back here by eye, and you can see if it's straight in line with the frame, you should be alright. Most times you'll be able to tell if it's bent or twisted, but that's definitely something you want to check out before you ride. With mountain bikes, one other thing that I kind of add in when I'm checking my tire pressure, you also want to check your air spring pressure in your fork or your rear shock. Not all mountain bikes have air springs for the suspension. A lot of your newer bikes do. Pretty much anything over $1,000, sometimes less than that, they will have air springs for the suspension. Most, like RockShox and stuff, they have an air chart for the fork, so you just kind of go off of your weight when you're all geared up and read what the chart says. You want to put that amount of air in it, and then check your sag. That's another thing we should probably do a video on, how to set that up correctly. But just like tire pressure, your air suspension pressure can change overnight, temperature changes, stuff like that. So again, even if I just rode my bike last weekend, if I'm going out this weekend, I'm going to check all that good stuff, make sure it's ready to go.